June 1950, communist tanks rolled across the 38th parallel. The Cold War had already turned hot in Berlin. Now the next test came thousands of miles away, on a peninsula few Americans could find on a map. Korea, a former Japanese colony, had been divided after World War II. The Soviet Union backed the Communist North. The United States backed the capitalist South. On June 25, 1950, the North Korean People's Army launched a massive invasion. America's first Cold War battle had begun. The North Korean invasion was swift and brutal. Soviet-built T-34 tanks led the assault, crushing South Korean forces. Within days, Seoul, the southern capital, had fallen. President Truman authorized General Douglas MacArthur, the hero of World War II, to intervene. The United Nations Security Council, boycotted by the Soviet Union, voted to approve an unforced to defend South Korea. American troops rushed from occupation duty in Japan to the front lines. They were unprepared, under-equipped, and about to face a near defeat. By August 1950, the UN forces had been pushed into a small corner of southeastern Korea. They formed a defensive line called the Pusan Perimeter. The outnumbered defenders held on, buying time for reinforcements to arrive. American and British troops, Australian and Canadian pilots, Turkish and Greek soldiers, all funneled into the perimeter. The North Koreans threw wave after wave against the line. They could not break it. Pusan was the hinge of the entire war. General MacArthur saw a way to turn the tide. He proposed a risky amphibious landing at Inchon, far behind North Korean lines. The port had treacherous tides, narrow channels, and was heavily defended. His own officers called it impossible, but MacArthur was a gambler. On September 15, 1950, U.S. Marines stormed ashore at Inchon. The gamble worked. Seoul was recaptured. The North Korean army collapsed, fleeing back across the 38th parallel. MacArthur pushed north toward the Yalu River, the border with China. MacArthur ignored warnings that China would enter the war. In October 1950, hundreds of thousands of Chinese volunteers crossed the Yalu River. The UN forces, stretched thin and deep in enemy territory, were caught completely off guard. The Chinese attacked in human waves, blowing bugles and whistles to terrify their enemies. The American 8th Army retreated in chaos. The war had entered a brutal new phase. The worst fighting happened in the frozen mountains near the Chosin Reservoir. 5 U.S. Marine Corps regiments and a U.S. Army division were surrounded by Chinese forces in sub-zero temperatures. The wind chill dropped to -50 degrees. Tanks froze, rifles jammed, men suffered frostbite within minutes. The Marines fought their way out, using airstrikes and sheer courage to break the Chinese encirclement. They lost over 6,000 men. They also gained a legend. Chosin became the Marine Corps defining battle of the 20th century. By mid-1951, the front line had stabilized near the 38th parallel, exactly where the war had started. Armistice negotiations dragged on for 2 years while men kept dying. Both sides dug in, creating a vast network of trenches and bunkers. American bombers pounded North Korea. Chinese and Soviet pilots flew MiG-15s against UN forces in the largest jet-to-jet battle since World War II, but neither side could win. Korea became the forgotten war, a stalemate that the American public wanted to forget. On July 27, 1953, an armistice was finally signed. Korea remained divided at the 38th parallel. The Korean Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ, became the most heavily fortified border in the world. Over 5 million soldiers and civilians had died, including 36,000 Americans. The war never officially ended. A peace treaty was never signed. North and South Korea are still technically at war today. The lesson is simple. The Korean War proved that containment would be a grinding, bloody struggle. It set the template for Vietnam, for Cold War proxy wars, and for a world permanently divided. Just the grit and the grind of war. If you want to see the next Cold War battle, subscribe.